Welcome, my darklings. This week I will be doing the Goth Tag. This is actually a very old concept. You answer a set amount of questions and then you tag a fellow YouTuber and they answer the same questions before tagging another person. So I think it's a really fun thing to do. So let's resurrect this tag. I will put all the questions in the description to benefit fellow YouTubers I will tag. I've also got my trusty Bat notebook so I don't run off script. Question 1. How long have I been a goth? I would say around the age of 13 was when I actively started looking for gothic rock bands and finding my feet and tastes within the alternative music genres. I got into Tool and Disturbed and Lacuna Coil that then morphed into Evanescence, Within Temptation and Nightwish. Ever since then, my style has continued to evolve. Question 2. How were you introduced to goth? I would credit my parents since I was even in nursery school, perhaps earlier. I was brought up on psychedelic rock, classic rock, even some folk, jazz. I did have a quite eclectic and cultured upbringing, especially in the arts and music world. I was taken to jazz festivals, I was introduced to gong and meatloaf and Marilyn Manson, even before I could talk or walk. I was never really forced to enjoy the same artists my parents did. They did appreciate that I liked darker music and they did mention bands like The Cure and Susie and the Banshees. However, I was too young to really process and appreciate that style of music until much later in life. Question 3. What do you think is the basis of the scene? Absolutely the music. I think that's the foundation, but naturally what would follow is people's attitudes. Maybe they're just generally inclined to the darker, the more macabre, the mysterious, the weird. I also think that the fashion does play a crucial role. Now, I'm not saying that unless you tick all 3 boxes, you are not a goth. Some people, for sensory or personal or cultural reasons, may not find that they like the fashion. If you're just naturally interested in a combination of the music and the attitude and culture, or the fashion and the music, then I would definitely consider yourself a goth if that is something you want to identify as. 4. Ooh, this one's juicy. What do you dislike about being goth? Now, I think this is a clumsily worded question. I don't dislike being goth. I don't dislike anything about being goth. What I do dislike is when non-goths make false and negative assumptions about being goth. There's nothing directly about being goth that I would dislike. Question 5. What do your parents think of it? I think I've already answered this one, haven't I? Well, my parents don't celebrate and embrace it, they do accept it. They do tend to say that it's quite posy, but not as in posers. They would say that it's all very sort of flamboyant and unnecessarily dressy. My mum affectionately calls it peacocking. Don't worry, it's all said in jest, and I think that they're generally fairly positive about the scene. Question 6. What goth subgenre would you class yourself as? Isn't the whole point of goth not to be fitted into a box? I do understand there are certain terms to help baby bats find their feet, show people on the outside of the scene an easier way to navigate. However, I tend to slide between ethereal and Victorian in fashion. Perhaps even whimsy goth. Music taste, I would say I'm really into dark wave, cold wave, ethereal wave, all the waves. I love waves. However, I'm not going to label myself as a specific type of goth. The type of goth that I would identify as now may or may not morph. Question 7. Eyebrows or no eyebrows? I am haphazardly trying to experiment with eyebrow shapes. However, I'm not confident enough to shave them off completely. Question 8. Who is your favourite band? My music taste is very eclectic and I tend to swing from one to another. I might go through a phase of playing one song over and over for a month until I'm sick of it. Or I might obsess about a band for a year and follow every little release that they do. Currently, I would say I'm listening to a lot of Diva Destruction and Ex Voto. Question 9. What is your opinion on Marilyn Manson? I know that he's not goth, but he is goth adjacent. While he is shock rock, he does have a darker inclined feel and attitude, atmosphere and aesthetic in his lyrics and videos. He has had a lot of controversy. However, if I'm looking solely at his art and work, I enjoy them for what they are. I also think he carries himself very well in interviews and gives very intelligent answers. Finally, question 10. What were your baby back days like? Naturally, it did make me a target for bullies, even amongst rockers and people who liked alternative music. If I wasn't ostracised, then I was scrutinised, and nothing I did quite fit the mould. You know, I would wear black clothes and boots, but the black clothes had all the labels cut out and were from charity shops. The boots weren't New Rocks, they were Magnum, which no one had ever heard of because they're army grade. I am very hard on clothes and I have very practical parents. So while they let me express myself, they did try to discourage me or show me the cons of following trends, fast fashion and copying what everyone else in the scene was doing. So in that sense, I was too much of an oddball for these self-proclaimed oddballs. It was a very lonely time, but my grandparents were a huge support during the summer holidays. Their heyday was the 50s, and of course there was a lot of Elvis Presley, rock and rolling. They very much supported me as I found my feet in my younger years. As they were probably finding their feet, it was just post-war Britain, rationing was still in effect, and we hadn't quite hit the 60s when the Beatlemania took over. I had a lot in common with them, even with my script. I digress. I hope that this video was a fun watch for you and helped you to get to know me better. I hope the following YouTubers I tag would be happy to answer these questions. I'd be very curious to see their answers. Going forward, I would like to tag Sanniz, the Swedish Elder Goth, Star Raven's Gothic Eternity, Gothically Yours, Professor M, and Awkwardly Gothic. Thank you so much for watching. Do subscribe if you like these old style videos. I have many other tags upcoming, and I'll see you next time. Take care, my darklings. Bye bye.